Good evening, everyone. System Shock here with the 169th episode of Book of Hours, playing as the artist. Our first run through YouTube, and finishing off a really full day, but we're still just in the closing moments of the first day of autumn. What we're going to be doing is leveling up Mrs. Kill to a point where she can... we've already done that, but we are talking with her just to get an extra memory. We will use her to open up the one of the sealed vaults. We still have one more, which we will take care of tomorrow, and then we also want to talk with Daymare. But first things first, let's finish off the timers that we already have. I imagine... yeah, we should see sundown before we're done talking with her. There we go. Night has fallen. Dawn will come soon. This will make it a little awkward for getting Reverend Timothy tomorrow, but we still will have plenty of time. De Oris, Book 3, in Latin, a 19th century reprint by the indefatigable Nathaniel Darcy Evers of a 14th century Latin translation of a 4th century work. This is usually described as the third volume of De Oris, but Darcy Evers' foreword argues persuasively that it's a substantial reworking by the original author. The lionsmith makes monsters, the colonel has his scars, but the De Oris now insists that neither can truly defeat the other, and that they must at some level understand these limits in their strategies, and that their enmity is an eternal engine of the world. Contradiction, something uncomfortable. Alright. Moving on, we've got the Snare of the Tree, collected proverbs of Aunt Mopsy. Once in the wood we call a visit, twice in the wood we call a journey, thrice we call coming home. Every timber has its knots, the straight and crooked both. Every weave is more absence than thread. You can't keep nowhere out any more than you can keep somewhere in. When the cuckoo learns the nightingale's song, our sleep is sweeter than honey. So, confounding parable, the moth, the grail, and the egg on hatching all tell different stories of the world's beginning. One of these stories is the oldest, but it may not be the first. The Black Book of Brittany, a volume of ink lore gifted to St. Brendan's by Brian of Brittany, who was made Earl of Cornwall after the Norman conquest. The black flower lies heavy, but the roots of the watchman's tree run deep, and they may not be hidden forever. The black flowers, spoken of as a doom or guise, can be held at bay with the last ink of power brewed from the pale mixture in the presence of sufficient winter and the arts of containment. Of course, this is the recipe for Nillikant, which we already know. I believe we found that, we locked that into our recipes 2 episodes ago. The Viennese Conundra, Van Driel describes odd events in Vienna, the disappearance of children, epidemics of parasite activity, animal mutilations, nightmares of worms, the activities of a charitable organization, the New Legions, that funds the burial of the poor. She proposes peculiar connections between these activities. When the individual K attends the meetings, black dogs are sacrificed and quartered. When the element M is in attendance, black mares are found with their throats slashed. I propose that these sacrifices are not necessary, but that our Legion friends may consider them fitting. Herewith, diagrams of the mutilations. The oldest and strongest... emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Alright, let's level up Disciplines of the Scar. Oh dear. So the answer to this in 12 seconds will be to give up the Curious Hunch. Or possibly the Ascendant Harmony. That is a shame. But that's also on me for mistaking the use of the confounding parable. Let's see what Mrs. Kill gives me, though. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. The foresight delivers. Excellent. There it is and can be no tizzer. Mrs. Kill, as every local gossip knows, came from France to marry Mr. Kill, but there is scant trace of the continent in her accent now. I think I got tripped up about the presence of moon, so again, that's on me. I didn't need to read the collected proverbs of Aunt Mopsy, but we're able to deliver the result anyway. So satisfying to have come so far. Now, I did level up sea stories, but I didn't read the description, so the sea has always been the widest road. And here we've got the sealed vault, a heavy marble door sealed with red wax, a triple lock chased with silver. And finally, we're going to want to talk to Damer, Grafen, Friederike, Dagmar, Sophia, Teresa, Helene, Begina von Nagelsberg. If you prefer, she doesn't. The affair of the messenger's casket. In a hidden fold of the mountains above the city of Cluj lies the enigmatic relic they call St. Mihail's coffin. Decades of patient work have finally breached its outer shell. Hello, dear. Only me, I'm afraid. Knew a gal in Cluj, Napoca, back in the day. Lovely gardens. Try a book with as much mystery knock as their knock interest. So she's at 4. St. Mihail's coffin. Got an idea of what St. Mihail might be. Don't think we want him getting out. Don't think so at all. Need to look up some seals and things. Okay, so I'm assuming a pattern book. Oh, we've already given her traveling at night. Advice on containment ought to do the trick, though. Actually, it's also appropriate. Jolly good. Enough names scorching up the place. What? More than enough. Pip pip. Sorry, I should have probably phrased that a little differently, but... So I suspect it'll be dawn before before Mrs. Kill finishes work on that, but we're in pretty good shape. I am going to want to restore my... Oh, we should also dream on the confounding parable. I'm going to want to restore my old wound. Oh, I can't. Right, of course, because, again, moon. That's a shame, actually, that this could have been used with Sacralamea, but... so I'm going to... What? I'm going to have to use the Shaft with Reverend Timothy. The skill is now level 5. To master boundaries through their determination. The scar marks wisdom and regrets. One is often born from the other. But yeah, so I probably want to bring in Mrs. Kill for memories. But I'll definitely bring in Reverend Timothy for the work. Memories fade, assistance departs, but the soul is refreshed. Okay. So we'll use Whist again to speak with Reverend Timothy. Reverend Timothy enjoys thoughtful conversation, prayer, and tea. He'll offer his assistance in return for a 1 shilling donation to church funds. We do appreciate the contribution. All right, let's go to work at the Sweet Bones. We will use metal for that. Fixing and mending. There's not much work on offer in Brandcrude, but I can find 6p worth of odd jobs. And Mrs. Kill's mood always improves when I drop by. Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. Now, I am going to want to bring in a Newman, and sooner rather than later, so let's get to work on that right away. That will be towards a fundamental aesthetic. We need Eric Payan to read that. So that's going to be to level up Reverend Timothy. Now, as far as the other things for Reverend Timothy, we already sort of we already put the effort into what we needed there. So Reverend Timothy, Shaft, memory, the drink, and in this case, we don't need to worry about the candle. So let's actually take the time to get the remaining, the replacements done, just because I do have a little bit of a free day today, given how I've spent my time. So let's use the core with the garden. Sea blessed pears in summer and autumn. In Numa, the shining pear. Some fragrant pears soft in the hand. I can never remember how to make candles. Okay, beeswax candle, and then I still need the moth orchid, though. It's one of these. I'm gonna cry if I didn't get myself any moth orchids. Yeah, there's a couple. Make a moth orchid scented candle to bring dreams. Okay, and then a tisane, which we can do at the kitchen range. Not so clear. Ideally, I would use something like well, it doesn't have to be Desires and Dissolutions, but ideally, I would use the Fet or the Tryst to make. Actually, you know what? I can do that at Ava's desk. Okay, Hush House still rings with Thwarted Desires. I'll mix that into a Tisane. Desires and Dissolutions with Apprentice level Grail creates Witching Tisane, or for a Scholar level recipe, if I add a flower, the mixture will become intoxicating. Now, it did occur to me I might want to keep the Tryst for something else. We'll still use Desires and Dissolutions, but I will just use a different desk. Nona's desk, I don't think works. Huh. I mean, if I have to, I'll use something different, but well, you know what? Let's see what I can. Tradisma Hyra, yeah, that's all moon. Intimates and precursors, I don't think. Yeah, we don't have. Well, it's also Beguiling Melody, so. Yeah, I think I'm making a little too much trouble for myself. I do need to really put this on something that's got a moon. So I guess the question is there such a thing that has moon and moth or moon and rose? And it feels like there should be, but I actually don't know. I couldn't, like, point to the one and say, this is definitely it. Maybe... Not the same problem as before. Yeah, you'd think that combination... Oh, you know what? The altars. There we go. Hush House still rings with Thwarted Desires. I'll mix that into a Tisane. So yeah, like I said, I did forget one last item, which was the Old Wound. Explore an old wound to awaken the violent resonances within. Okay, so after all of that, I do still want to level up Sacra Lamea. In fact, I was maybe a bit premature to use the Fet, seeing as that would be useful with leveling this up. Now, right now, I have a 5 that I need to level up to an 8. Actually, there is one other thing that I want to do, and that's to try and get some more moth orchids. So, moth orchids in spring and summer, honeysuckle jasmine in autumn, so I can't get any more moth orchid. Fair enough. Yeah, I think in this case we're just going to wait for conversation, as dull as that seems. And the hail will help us with Sacra Lamea, so got lucky there. Alright, Reverend Timothy's ready to go, as is Mrs. Kill. Somber as autumn, as kind as autumn, she also likes her beer. Alright, so we have a few items here. The Silver Vault. Did the Curia of the Isle construct this vault? They were not long. Most of them were not long. wrong. So they were not the Obliviots, that society of unseen immortals bound by 3 oaths. But this vault does seem to reference the oath called the Silver Chain, which forbade men to lie with women or women with men. For what may come is not always a crime of the sky, yet that is a furious danger. So we've got a few cool things here. So we've got the Sheridic Book of Suns. In this case, that also houses a Numen, and that is in Deep Mandaic, so that is one that we can actually read. We have the Turquoise Hand, a calligraphic manual of Ramsund, which employs as exemplar text Ferredudin's Conference of the Birds in Ramsund, and fairly low-level Rose, so that is another Numen that we can read. And we have an uncatalogued Dawn book. On top of that, we have got three caskets, 3 things to open. So we're doing well in terms of getting all sorts of fancy items. Okay. And Daymare is now off. Jolly good. Enough name scorching up the place. What? More than enough. Pip pip. Alright. So out of the people we've talked with, Peel. Dr. Peel, confident that the occupant of St. Mihail's coffin would escape soon, was equally confident that someone or something would be eaten by something or someone. He seemed quite chipper about it. MCO Lee suspected that St. Mihail's coffin might contain the name of, a name of the Chandler. Perhaps, she said, the second one she'd heard mentioned that year. She was clearly perturbed by the possibility. Dr. Southey, inspired by the stories of St. Mihail's coffin to look into the story of St. Columba's sarcophagus, seemed to find what she sought. Always the tide, she said. And Daymare left Hush House with a plan to ensure St. Mihail, whatever he might actually be, stayed in his coffin. So we're back to 3 gold spintria. Well, obviously, if I can, I'd like to spend that on more books. So we'll start with the Shaft for Reverend Timothy. Education or Beguilement boosts Knock and Forge. And we are going to be sitting on some elements of the soul for a little while. That's just because I can't pick up the Moth Orchid. And the priority right now is going to be to level up Sacralamea. Although there are some things that I can do to sort of push things in my favor. It is worth remembering here, so with Moth and Sky, there aren't that many things that I can expect Mrs. Kill to generate for me. So we've got Storm, Solace, Impulse. I think that might be it, actually. But again, I can augment it with the memories that I can augment it with my own memories that I can generate. So a nice drop. I can offer my assistant something to drink. We should have the Newman ready in time for that. Although I may want to put some thought into what other books I'm going to be reading. Right, Scent Like Evening. This candle is scented with Moth Orchid. Towards a Fundamental Aesthetic, or The House of Glass, Julian Cosley considered this his masterwork. Techniques for perception and analysis which permit invidious and apocalyptic conclusions. Probably the most assiduously suppressed book in history, the entire run was destroyed. Even the presses were melted and dispersed, but the manuscript edition has survived. The perfect hegemony of the hours is perhaps eternal, but Cosley proposes and describes confinement inescapable, aesthetic and optical techniques which might contain even an hour. Profoundly disrupting the order of the Mansis. He presents this as his own work, but there are hints here and there that he received inspiration, even assistance, from the nowhere hour named Snow. Everything ultimately comes down to a choice between eternity and history. There's only one place you're safe from both, and it's not a place anyone would want to be. It's a prison that can only exist in certain histories. Move gingerly while the pain lasts. Old wound. The wound is visible, the pain is not. Witching to Sane. It's best when it's warm, but it'll keep. So we'll put that back into the librarian's quarters. As they used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. And here we will pay up to restore the metal. We might even just cycle through it again, but I feel like there's plenty that I can do. Plenty I can do with my Elements of the Soul, so I'd be a little reluctant. If nothing else, I can just sort of open up all of these different boxes. Down to the Grussians. Ah, darn it. All right. Reverend Timothy is always, always happy to chat. That was, I was originally going for the, to give him the inescapable confinement. Basically, that's a net loss of 15 seconds, but we're not trying to speed run the game, so, you know, it's a little bit of an inefficiency in the day, but not the end of the world. Fragrant pears, soft in the hand, so we'll put that back in the kitchen. And just trying to think. I still want to try and find some use for the Tanglebrag with Lantern Moth and Nectar. I really feel like I should... Oh, sorry, and Scale. I should find something that takes material and then maybe just see if I can somehow eke out some sort of... some sort of creation. I'm not quite sure what. I don't need to listen to everything Reverend Timothy says. He doesn't even really expect me to, but I'm often glad when I do. Okay, so the gossip doesn't really get me anything. I am going to talk with him about the inescapable confinement now. I can discuss a memory with my assistant. Better now. And again, because we're sort of waiting to make use of these, I am going to make money with the metal again. There's not much work on offer in Brandkrug, but I can find 6 worth of odd jobs. We did, of course, also spend some money bringing in Reverend Timothy twice, so that's 2 shillings we're down. Not that we're short on money, of course. But I figure, given that really, like, the one element of the soul's not going to be moving the needle that much, I can do something with it, and then in the end we can use it at the end of the day to sort of push us over the edge on Sacralimea. Ideally I could get 2 done, but I think realistically I'm probably only going to get 1. Memories don't last long outside books, but it's made a difference for the day, and I think that's enough for us to go to the sealed vault. So a heavy granite door sealed with white wax, a triple lock ornamented with ivory and black nephrite. Now, I have a hypothesis that says it might actually be wiser for me to open up these vaults later on in the session. But the thing is that, you know, when I first started playing this on YouTube, I had not completed the game. And I do sort of like the idea of, I realize I'm not explaining some of the basics as often as I do later on in the series, but I do like the idea of playing this generally like I don't know what I already know. To me, at least, I think that's just a little bit more interesting. So, for instance, I have a pretty good idea of where I can find a number of these texts. But in some of them, sorry, the texts that house Newman, I believe. I'm sorry. There are a few books that house a Newman that I can unlock, the Treasures of the House. But I think it's a little bit more interesting to play a game and not have it be, you know, it was revealed to me in a dream where a certain item is, but rather to read the item, even sometimes have a little bit of a gap between when I read the item and when I actually get the item. Or, sorry, when I read the book and when I get the item that the book is pointing to. There's at least one of those still in the house. And one of the reasons why I think that's also interesting to do is that, again, I have an idea that there might be 1 or 2 that I'm... I haven't gotten over any of my own playthroughs. And so that also gives me an opportunity to sort of double-check a few of my assumptions and see where I might have gone wrong in previous playthroughs, because in the end I don't believe I have read all of the books in the game yet. I've read a very large number of them, but I don't think I've read all of them. Anyways, a heavy granite door sealed with white wax, a triple lock ornamented with ivory and black nephrite. So here we're going to talk with Mrs. Kill. Mrs. Kill has seen more of the world than she usually lets on. Conversations with her yield the occasional surprise. I can also probably afford to read the... I could probably afford to read the Sun Disfigured. It's not the most interesting choice for me to read, but I think it's a smart one because I can use it with Sacralamea. So I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. I'm trying to think of a situation where I will need a regret. There it is and give me no tizzer. Mrs. Kill, as every local gossip knows, came from France to marry Mr. Kill, but there's scant trace of the continent in her accent now. As I used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. So we'll bring the medal back. That should be the last cycle that I go through. Now, one option I have here is to bring in the Weather Storm. I think I'm going to do that with the core. Investigate this object. And then it's tough for me to think about Moth. I guess a name day riddle would also, or actually, I wonder if I use health at Natan's desk, so I could use Edict's Liminal. Yeah, and then I add the gossip, and that gives me the name day riddle. And then I guess I can also make music whenever I want. Alright, here we go. The Ivory Vault. How did the Curia of the Isle begin? There is no evidence they began with the House of Leith, that society of unseen immortals bound by 3 oaths. But this vault, much newer than the tunnels above, does seem to reference the oath called the Ivory Chain, which forbade commerce with the Hours, except sometimes with the winter hour known as the Elegist, or the Ivory Dove. Solomon Husher remarked that this might be considered less an oath of rejection of the Hours and more an oath of loyalty to the Elegist, but Solomon, of course, vanished into the snow. So here we have a records box, a scaled casket, an attaché case, imperial casket, guard casket, ironclad casket, the copperlith omphalos. What is this? A tufted fossil of silken fiber, big as a child. And the sky and the scar, gnomic exhortations that might be described as emergency procedures for the return of the traveling kinds of Carapace Cross. This book houses a Newman so powerful it can perhaps believe itself. And the Sun Disfigured, a scroll of anthropoderm parchment written in the golden ink called Uzalt. This book houses a Newman, a truth so powerful it can perhaps believe itself. The author of the text calls herself the Elegabline. Sometimes she seems to be Sunset Celia, the Watchman's name. Sometimes she seems to be Lady Tryphon, the Grail Long. It is unclear whether these are separate entities or the same person. It may be unclear even to the writer. The flaws in the Sun's plan are elucidated. The Sun's plan itself is never entirely clear, but it is a project of some kind to enter, possess, or surrender to the glory, that pure light above the mansus. This book suggests ways in which that plan might fail. So this is specifically for the Sacralamea. Mrs. Kill has given us another gossip. So I should be taking a minute soon to... Basically, I should be do an inventory of what I realistically can get in terms of Moth and Sky. We'll probably do that in the afternoon. The thread parts. The weave is empty. The skies cry out. I'm not upset with the way that the day turned out, but I feel like I probably could have done a little bit more. I'm going to set aside here tower rises, so I'm going to need 18 rows to work with that. Now I think one answer here is the preliminal meter. So we can combine that with the FET, which will give me 2, so that brings us up to 11. Alright, so I really should be making my choices now. I've got 1.4 seconds. So, soul, skill, memory, and record. Okay, so actually let me take the minute to write this down, because I think I've done this a couple of times, but... Okay, so tower rises. So my options here would be preliminal meter, which I think is my highest. FET will give me 2, so that brings us up to 11. And then I've got, I believe it's just 2 memories. Yes. Okay, so, and then what I need is 18. It's actually a pretty tall order. So Horizon Sight takes me to 15. I guess an enduring reflection. So yes, that will be tomorrow's focus. Okay, there it is in Camino Tizzer. Mrs. Kill, as every local gossip knows, came from France to marry Mr. Kill, but there's scant trace of the continent in her accent now. So I think it's fair to say whatever we don't use today is lost. So let's say that the sun's weakness gets set aside. Well, maybe it isn't actually. We'll see. I will read... Actually, you know what? This doesn't need to be that difficult. The Faust gets set aside. The Whist gets used to get a song, and it really can be any kind of song. But I think I am one short still. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. So let me just take a quick minute here and see where we're at with the Sweet Bones. Okay, I am getting another element of the soul back. That's good. Better now. Okay, so with that in mind, I've got 1 here. So again, we need 5. So we have 3. So I want the metal to get me a 4th for sure. So we'll use Ambrose's desk. And here I think probably just a beguiling melody makes as much sense as anything. Okay. I know we're a little late, but I'm going to... I'll get the Sacra Lamea leveled up. Like I guess I said this a little bit earlier, but I would have liked to have leveled up Sacra Lamea twice, but we did also do a lot today, so I'm kind of willing to trade off the two. I think tomorrow the task will be, first of all, obviously we want to finish off the Sacra Lamea work, but I'm thinking maybe what we can do as well is we can catalog that one Dawn Period book. I guess it would be this one here. And then I can start shelving some of the books that house the Newman. I would kind of like to read A Tower Rises just because that actually clears me out in terms of new texts to read, and then I can start focusing on, you know, the Wound Wounds, Nin's Cages, But I can also start reading some of these maybe less difficult texts that house a Newman, because I imagine that they will be giving me memories that I can use to read some of these more difficult texts. Yeah, none of this helps, unfortunately. So we'll probably wind up using the sun's weakness after all. Is this the way to the wood? But perhaps the wood is not a suitable place for the librarian. A deceptively intricate riddle that might just teach us who we really are. Gravenius van Loren was notoriously fond of these. So first best would be if I can take a memory that will be relevant to Sacra Lamea overnight. But we'll see where we are after talking with Mrs. Kill. Okay, that's a regret. Unhatched hymns, hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers and name of the hour called Meniscate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next, madrigal to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The hymn of the phases celebrates the Meniscate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The hymn of reflections, more puzzlingly, celebrates the Meniscate as the sister of Janus, mother of shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. So music that urges valor and violence. Okay, so we've got 4 of those. Now, didn't I have a beguiling melody on the way? I did, in 2.5 seconds. The Morphe Codex, a priestess of the Sisterhood of the Knot, claims to have discerned the true meaning of the Thunderskin's birth. The writer credits the Red Grail, the Ring Yew, and the Horned Axe, the powers the Sisterhood reveres, with agreeing a final treaty between the hours of the house and the hours they displaced. The Thunderskin loved the Yew, and the Grailed Axe destroyed him as restitution for the slaying of the Horned Axe's sisters and brothers. The Thunderskin entered the Mansus through the Peacock Door, a privilege never given to the witch and sister, but then their merit was much less. The writer admits that entry through the Peacock Door is unseemly, but insists that under the circumstances there was no other way. Beguiling melody, a sweet enchantment of a song. So we got through to the 5 we needed in the end. So we'll take the Faust, the memory, throw everything we can. Nope. Wrong set. All of these are expiring, so we want to put that in. At last, I am something of an authority in this. So we'll have 2 more to work with. Not too much. Honestly, it's anything goes as far as which of these I keep. None of these are directly relevant to what I want to do, although I think I'll hang on to the Gossip because of its higher level rows. Now that night has fallen, I can rest and perhaps dream on the day's doings. But yeah, I mean, tomorrow is going to be more or less what we did today. The only difference is that I'm not going to be spending the time trying to, make moth candles and such. So I think probably I will start by loading up on a bunch of songs and other things that Mrs. Kill can't produce herself. And then I also think we will work towards maybe getting the memories we need for Tower Rises. The skill is now level 6. Yeah, I think that will be it for tonight. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.